and a dog.
Nice.
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to Raising Excellence, the most important hour of your week. I'm Michael, the MC and Opportunity Ambassador for today's show. And today's teaser show title is Could Alcohol Be Your Healer? With me today are a few of my favorite co hosts, as well as a special guest, Agnieszka, our psychosomatic illuminator, and our guest, Jack.
With Luna on his lap.
Luna has joined us as well, and our freedom facilitator, Dennis.
Greetings and blessed love, everybody.
So this week we didn't get the breatharian, but we've got something even better. We're going to be talking about alcohol and the kind of some of the I guess we'll start with some of the misconceptions and kind of misunderstandings about where a lot of the alcohol and kind of some of the beneficial attributes to some of the things that we think we're familiar with, things like beer and some of the other spirits that are out there. But where
I don't
do we
know.
want to go there?
I don't know if you got that quite right. Because it's not necessarily about the beneficial attributes of the beer that you can currently buy in the store. It's about how to create beer that's actually healing as opposed to the one that has ingredients that are stupefying or not so healthful.
Well, I
What
think
do you think, Jack?
we want to start with the problem, and so we want to most people are under the impression that alcohol is just bad for you,
Yeah,
and that
I think
it's a crutch that a lot of people rely on, and it's kind of an entertainment device rather than something that could be healthy or useful.
yeah, I think one of the largest issues with it is the culture surrounding it, and like just to forward to essentially like where I got my perspective and information was like I grew up in a place where people were really concerned with their health and like sort of hippies and like liking good food and taking care of their bodies and like so that was a focus where I was from, and so it was interesting to watch like how much cannabis was idolized there, and how much alcohol was really demonized. And so when I spent like most of my life thinking that just alcohol was bad and it's just like something to abuse yourself to, um, like at a party, and either like release something inside of yourself and like have an excuse for it that you couldn't sober, or like just find a way to be self-destructive and get together like at a house party with a bunch of people who are all gonna like end up vomiting all night, or like breaking up with their significant other, or like cheating, or like doing all this like bullshit.
Getting
So I
into
just thought
fights
it was
with other people.
right. So that was my conception of it, like both just because of the culture I was like raised in, what the belief was around me, and then also seeing the people therefore around me were like more into having that relationship with it. But then I traveled Europe and started learning a lot about it, like with an open mind. It started off with me being in the Czech Republic and Poland and Austria and countries like that. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do some drinking. That's like, I want to see. Like I was kind of driven by a deeper impulse to like get to know this people like at a deeper level. Like I eat and drink what we have down here in Mexico right now, and it's that same sort of impulse. But what I found there really resonated with me, and I started working at a village with 50 people in it, like up in the Pyrenees. This 500-year-old village is a really beautiful thing, and so um, like we used red wine as a stimulant to like help us when we were like digging trenches in the gardens and that sort of thing. And so it was really interesting. It was something that you could do while working with your guys, and it's like it's cool. There's no judgment. You're not fucking off. You're not getting so drunk you can't perform your work. And then the whole village would come back at night to the same bar and play cards and just talk. And so that's actually how I learned pretty much all the Spanish that I know, except for like a little bit in high school, was just hanging out and drinking with these Spaniards all night. And I realized, like, wow, this is not remotely what I thought this was. Like, this is not what alcohol was supposed to be. It's like, I'm like learning Spanish by speaking to some guy who's like 80, still working in his fields, and he's telling me like, his life story. And like, that's the kind of interactions I'm having on alcohol. I'm like, wow, so this is really, like, this is not about being self-abusive or, like trying to just act out or like a cry for help or like whatever weird shit was going on back in the States. And so yeah, then I got interested in that, and I found a book that my dad had laying around when I got back to the States, and it was called Sacred Herbal Healing Beers. And like, everybody was arguing with me about like the experience and like, no, alcohol, like, what do I like, I was going into this with all the people I knew and like trying to talk to people about it, and that really pissed my dad off. And so he might have given me this, he gave me this book earlier or something, and I read it, and it confirmed what I was saying, that like across all the continents on the world, except for maybe Australia, but there were being rituals done. Even some Native American folks, like once a year, all made alcohol and drank it ceremonially together. So I realized, like, wow, there's actually a very ancient tradition, and it was super widespread, like more widespread than any other substance, I think, right? Because yeah, so
But it was also
so
different
so
in every
deep.
country, right? It's
Right,
the
and
same
it was,
but different.
and so it's like, that's another thing, is it's not just alcohol, but it would be like what people would like in Europe. They used to use a lot of different herbs, like digested today, like Underberg or whatever, that's like an alcohol extraction of a bunch of different herbs, but they would use just all kinds of different things. And so it wasn't like an alcohol with nothing in it, right? It had, like, beer used to not necessarily have hops, which is this, like it's like soy. It really messes with people's hormones and mimics estrogen in our bodies. And so it's like a form of population control to like, it was mandated by law that like legitimate beer had hops in it, and otherwise the crown could like confiscate the beer that you were making, and that sort of thing. And so it was like, we see this a lot in European culture as well. There's like this global colonialization, like by a modern ideal, but like this used to be like, alcohol was the catalyst for plant medicine in ancient Europe. So like, there's like European folk medicine, like essentially consisted of a lot of drinking, but that's
So is there beer without hops out in the world?
hardly. Like, it's been hard to find any. Pretty much everyone does, and I don't drink beer for that reason. Like, I love dark beers, but I can tell that the hops in it, especially like if I drink a lot of beer, that sort of thing, I notice the changes in my body, lethargic, tired, not a lot of time, not very fun to spend time around ladies and
But like,
that
how
sort of
many
thing.
beers? Is that like 2 beers or like 6 beers?
I couldn't say, but I just started becoming sensitive to it and noticed that like every time I would drink, like that's what would come out. But of course that was in the Czech Republic, right? So their beers are
Hoppy,
hoppy there.
really hoppy.
But even later I could still notice it, like to a lesser degree with like, darker beers, but like less hoppy beers, but yeah, there's still that effect. So it's like the effect that this alcohol had, that's like central to society, it was changed. It was made from something that might have been empowering, or like digestive bitters to help with your digestion or clean your blood or whatever they were putting before, like mugwort and all sorts of things with some really interesting properties. I can only guess like how deep they were going with that. But that's of course the notion of the idea of potions in European folklore and all that, right? All these potions that would do, like, that's where the idea comes from, because alcohol was this whole tradition, this whole like healing process where they would get the medicine out of the herbs in their environment through alcohol. And so then, they'd be drinking with all their meals because it has these other effects too. So like, just getting, I think that alcohol deserves respect. And yeah, like
To this day, my mother, every time she buys Jagermeister, she says it's medicinal for my digestion.
yeah, I
It's
mean,
true.
yeah,
It is.
I
Even though
think there might be a couple movie references that come into play there as well.
what?
movie
There's,
references.
there's like a famous one where he just, it's just medicinal.
Right,
I
right.
think that was a cowboy movie or something.
I don't think my mom has ever watched movies, so no, not those, not usually, not a lot of movies.
Well, but
And
it's
she wouldn't be, yeah.
effect on the society.
I'm sure it's common. Like, I mean, it is medicinal. It has like 57 herbs in it or something like that. 27.
Right. But so it just depends a lot on the quality of the alcohol you're using and the herbs that you're using as well, right? Because it's like we used to be drinking cool stuff, like depending on where we came from, and then down here in Mexico, everything's Coca-Cola. So is it bad to drink something with your meal? Like, no, there's all sorts of wonderful things you can drink that are like fermented, that'll help you digest, that will compound your digestion, that sort of thing, you know? But then if everyone's just used to drinking Coke and everyone's like, oh, you know, drinking something with your meal's bad, it's like, well, actually, you know, there was something better in place and we just lost that. But you know, it's just something that I think is really cool, and alcohol, based on my introduction to it, has a special context with me. I mean, not just that. It's like, you know, at communion, there's wine. Like, there's a like the yeah, in European culture, like alcohol is a very sacred thing. Like in the primitive cultures all over, but yeah, it's like, you know, the meat of inspiration, all these things. So it's like has a really sacred context in my mind, and then yeah, I use it in that way, and it's not a
Jack,
problem.
yeah. Just as you know, being you're a guest, what's your background? Where do you come from, and why is this meaningful to you?
What was the second part of that?
Why is this subject matter
my
meaningful to
expert.
you?
So I come from Southern Oregon, and yeah, so our thing out there is cannabis, and that's the kind of culture that I was raised in and grew up with. Like, you know, at high school there were definitely more kids who smoked pot, like by far, than didn't. So you know, you could see like in every sort of aspect of the human psyche coming from my town, like how everybody interacted with that, and it was like such an integral part of growing up. Like, you know, we would all go to lunch and get high together and come back, and like that was the thing, right? We were all in constant contact with weed, and then I had like a massive culture shock, realizing, you know, where I realized that actually this is just like the culture that I was raised up in. So a lot of people think that alcohol is just evil, but really there's a deeper truth to it, and I found that by going to like alcohol cultures where everyone's going to the, you know, everyone's meeting up every day, but instead of around cannabis, it's around alcohol. And so a lot of it's just like my experience on the ground. But I worked in like that village I was talking about. I worked in vineyards and, you know, like gardens and orchards and other things as well. It's a really big operation. But in the houses there were like these wells for 500 gallons, because it's the furthest north they could grow wine, and they would sell it to folks north of them. So like it was this whole traditional like wine producing town, and so I got to see a part of that and have like access to wine that this guy, my boss, would sell to the old folks who weren't content with the way Spanish wine had went in recent years, like downward. So I was drinking this like
Artisan.
literally, yeah, this artisan, like the best wine you can get on the planet that like isn't even sold in stores in Europe, right? Like straight from the source, and just like seeing what it was actually meant to be, and how it was supposed to be used, you know, because it was in a super positive context. So it's like it's mainly my eyes
But you've
and
done
my
research.
experience. I've done research. I don't know
Yeah.
how much of that I could cite per se. I'll brush up before I come back on here, so I'm not, you know, talking out of my butt about anything. But yeah, and then there's that book as well, and it's mainly an idea, you know. It's like everyone, a lot of people like to project onto others like you should be vegan, or no, you should be carnist, or you should do whatever, and it's like people are generally wrong at the extremes, and about those sorts of things, and something works different for everybody. So I don't know, alcohol. I'm not saying it's like,
For everyone.
yeah, I'm just saying that it might be for some people, and you don't necessarily have to be guilty. And hey, there's like this whole super cool
Healing.
alchemical science that you can start doing with when you start fermenting your own, fermenting and brewing your own alcohol. Like, there's a bunch of recipes in that book that are really cool, like for psychedelic um, alcohols that like you put like magic root or like henbane and like these other plants in there, and it activates psychedelic compounds in them. So there's like, a whole level of plant medicine, or like using it as a stimulant, using it for like any kind of herbal concoction you could ever really need. And so it goes really deep, and I'm just kind of an enthusiast of that, I guess. My dad did a lot of fermenting growing up, so yeah, it's cool to see how that comes out. Put all the things together and kind of like get to play scientist with it. But I just want to inoculate people to that idea. Yeah, maybe turn some people onto that, because I think it's important. I think people like being bound or around something is important. Like, I come here pretty much every day to drink coffee.
Cafe rustica.
Yeah, and so like it really eating and taking whatever you're taking together with other people is really important. So if we could get some brewers down in the Amicus community, that would be hella awesome.
I feel it's
Yeah,
a,
that'd be a lot of fun. I would, yeah. I'll have a vineyard here sooner or later.
Nice. I feel it's a great
Right,
add-on
Dennis.
to the episode that we did some time ago about fermentation. So there we discussed, the various benefits of fermentation itself, but we haven't touched upon, the context with alcohol. And so yeah, I'm really excited about Wednesday, finding out more. And many of the topics that you just touched upon, Jack, is like, well, like when I look at my past, like when I lived in Brazil, like I found out, alcohol can be used as a fuel. That wasn't on my on my screen before. And then I looked into extracts and tinctures, and the alcohol is there, is an integral part of that, and that has a long history in itself. Then living in Jamaica, you have bitters. They call it bitters, and you have some Rastaman who the roadside, they will prepare bitters for you. They will sell bitters in order to wash out your belly, in order to heal you from certain conditions. So that's a an old tradition there as well, and there's much knowledge. Last week we touched upon the different healing herbs and foraging. So combining that, I think it's a great continuation of some of the topics that we have covered previously. And then, of course, coming from Germany originally, it is beer here is considered to be a meal. So it's part of the meal. It's an integral part of the meal for most people. And then also you have the when you mentioned the psychedelic abilities of some of the brews that have been made in ancient times. It reminded me of we call them berserker, berserks, maybe in English. So they would use. Yeah, so
Berserkers.
they would use their beer or their brews in order to get ready for battle and for fight, and that in itself is a super interesting aspect of that as well. So you can, I guess, induce different stages and manipulate yourself on the scale of human behavior, and if you can do that consciously and with awareness, then you certainly can use it to your benefit. And everything that is used without our awareness, and used by people who have not our best well-being at heart, we certainly should make an effort to find out more about it and dive into it. And yeah, so in order to use it for our benefit and for the benefit of all.
Perfect. Well, that's a good closing note for this little teaser. I think we'll definitely be back on Wednesday with more. And I will ask these guys some really deeper questions, like, why doesn't Dennis drink alcohol? Anyway, the answer for that will be on Wednesday. And
that's a cliffhanger. Nice.
I will be back, and we'll talk more about alcohol and the healing benefits of alcohol for us all. We can all make our own brews. Ancient art that is not dead and not even forgotten.
Yes, and like always, looking forward to your continued input, questions, and welcome to our living room. And thank you for your time and for joining in.
Nice.
And
All right,
Wednesday.
look forward to Wednesday, 4:35 p.m.
Central.
Central.
In Mexico,
Not sure.
3:35.
Okay,
And what is that?
3:35.
10:35 CET, Europe, Germany, Amsterdam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All
Nice
righty.
one.
See you
Thank
then.
everybody. Bye bye.
Bye.
All right.